Welcome back to the Upset Podcast. This evening, we're talking about justice in labor, from the Bible to today's labor unions. Coming up next. Once again, welcome back to the Upset Podcast. We're so happy that you tuned in with us on this Labor Day weekend Sunday. And I'm happy that these great people are here as well. The Fabulous Four. Welcome back. We have a doctor to welcome back to the house.
We got two doctors in the house today.
We got two doctors in the house.
Is there anybody sick? The Bible says. He didn't say call the doctors. He said call the elders of the church.
All right.
Yes, well, God knows I'm elderly.
But no,
good to be back, everybody. Good to be back.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, hope you enjoyed your vacation and a little time off. We all need that. This is our plug. If you haven't taken a vacation yet this year, make sure you schedule it. Self-care is important.
Yep, if you're a pastor out there, you have not taken a vacation, you're doing something wrong.
I confess and I repent. I avoided. I would skip vacations often it directly led to some deleterious aspects of my life, and I deeply regret not taking vacations.
Even if it's a staycation, do that.
Yeah, get away.
Yeah, take some time. All right. Well, a lot has been happening this week. And I want to start off, actually, Keenan, I know you participated in an important march on this past Thursday. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this past Thursday, the National Action Network led by Al Sharpton, they led a march on Wall Street in New York City. So it was about 4 other pastors from Allegheny East and myself. I saw some other pastors from the Northeastern Conference there. But basically, the march was standing against Donald Trump's, basically dismantling of DEI. So that's what the march was really about. We started at Foley Square in downtown Manhattan. That's basically near the African burial ground in Federal Plaza. We marched up Broadway. We marched past the Charging Bull, or as somebody say, the Golden Calf. We marched past that, and then it was just a number of just civil rights leaders, just one after another, just coming up and speaking about just what we have to do. Because as you all know, just to give context, when Donald Trump got in office, it was the revoking of the EO 11246, which required affirmative action for federal contractors. So that was revoked. Placing DEI staff on paid leave right off the back. I mean, so many things he has done to dismantle, so many things that so many have worked for. So that's what the march was against.
Okay. And how many would you say were out there? Was it a good turnout?
From, I think it was a couple of thousand.
These are all clergy, if I'm not.
No, it was everybody.
Oh, not no clergy?
Yeah, it's everybody. A little bit of everybody.
We're just encouraging clergy to be.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yep. So yeah, had a good time.
Okay.
Yeah. Keenan, I want to commend you. I want to commend the president of the Allegheny East Conference, Trevor Kinlock, Al Johnson, and
Kobe Matlock.
It is so important to show up.
Yeah.
And to demonstrate your rejection, your righteous indignation about these things. I was speaking with someone the other day who said, it doesn't matter what you do, the president's going to do what he wants to do anyhow. That is the farthest thing from the truth. You have to continue to show up. And I'm just so grateful that our guys are now starting to really demonstrate a level of activism on the stage of action where it matters the most. And I hope it's the beginning of something that will continue to grow.
Me too.
I want to ask you guys this question because I heard this and it disturbed my spirit so much. It was a older preacher, and he said that we just need to continue to preach the Bible, Revelation, and Daniel, and leave these social issues alone. And it just disturbed me so badly. I said, you make people think that Jesus doesn't care about our issues of oppression and what we're encountering in the country. And I said, I just don't, that's just not wise to say. I see you ready, Dr. Keenan.
He's on rubbing his
on this, because I was like, Mr. Preacher, I respect you mightily, but that's not right. Go ahead.
No, well, I just want to say that there is a disconnect, normally between eschatology, prophecy, the Italian, and the way we see current events. There's a disconnect, because we just been miseducated, I think. So there's nothing wrong with preaching prophecy. There's nothing wrong with that. But justice is in there, But if we have been taught through a Eurocentric lens, we must see that, So that's why I hear people say, just focus on the gospel. Leave that stuff over there. Focus on, but social justice, that is the gospel.
Yeah.
You think that's Eurocentric to that?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I can see that, Tyler. Why would you say that?
That's my humble opinion there, Tyler.
Yeah. I mean, when you say Eurocentric, it creates, it makes a statement that seems to say that certain races or ethnicities are more inclined to think a certain way. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I would put it this way. Normally, if you've seen it through the oppressor's eyes, some things are not going to jump out to you, but God is always on the side of the oppressed.
So the original oppressors of Scripture are Egypt and Assyria.
The original oppressors of
Scripture.
Okay.
Egypt and Assyria.
I'd say they were dark people.
Yeah, so it's not Eurocentric.
No.
Oppression is universal.
No, that's two different things. What I'm saying, if you're being taught the Bible, not what's
the start of Adventism,
if you're being taught the Bible, you're not going to see those. Not going to see those things. Those things are not going to jump out to you. But we have to speak about social injustice. It's just not going to be there.
I definitely agree in that justice part. I think some of that may come up a little bit later in our discussion, but I'm just grateful that you gentlemen and if there were ladies there as well, it is time for us as a people to measure up and to take a stand and to demonstrate our concern for relevant issues and matters.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I want to stress this too. Social justice is not separate from the gospel.
Yeah, it's
I think it is the gospel.
Yeah.
I mean, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because He's anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah. People centric. Also, I always hate when these little notifications come up on my phone and you see another school shooting or something going on. And I saw it, I was like, come on, please, no. The school just started pretty much. Like,
it was the first week of school.
Yeah, how are we here again? And I keep I don't want it to be normalized. So I want to feel what I feel every time I see it. I'm just so sick and tired of having to see the devastation. And at first I told myself, I'm not gonna look into it. Like, I'm not gonna, because I do a lot of like what they call doom scrolling, or but I have to do that because I have to humanize these situations. And so for those who, I'm sure by now you've seen about the shooting that happened at, I think it's Annunciation Catholic Church. It was they had a school there, first week of school, as you said, and gunman, my understanding is he was a former student of the school, 23 years old,
and his mother used to work there.
And they said that he had a fascination with these mass shootings. And that's the thing to me, like the fact that people are being fascinated by what happens, because of course he did end his life at the end after I think two were killed and several others were injured, severely injured, maybe
Many.
I think like 18.
yeah. And then of course he ended his life, and this fascination with these shootings, and not even necessarily wanting to live, but to just know your name will now be, a part of history or on the news, is enough for them. And I feel like that's something, I don't know, Keenan, we talk about mental health and things of that nature. I feel like that's definitely something we need to tackle. When people have a fascination with killing, especially school killings or mass shootings. That's something sick there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just we have become desensitized. I mean, and if he has a fascination with it, just anything, we know this from the Bible. By beholding, you become changed. If you focus on something just so much,
Yeah.
you just consume with that, then yeah, that thing takes a hold of it.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know what was his if he had any mental health, like if he went someplace where it was diagnosed or anything like that. Be interested to know.
Well, I mean, one thing worth knowing, even though it isn't definitive or conclusive, is that he had legally changed his name expressive of the fact that he wished to be identified as female. And so he was a person that would have been classified as they rather than him. But at the heart of it all, whether a person is, whatever their reasons are, is this grotesque and distorted need for empowerment, which comes from picking up a gun and then demonstrating that you have power over others. Watching, like the original case that was most celebrated in the last generation or so was the Columbine case, where these kids, feeling disempowered, now lorded it over people. And that sense of, I have power now, and watch me demonstrate it. It is a sick and twisted thing, and so you have to learn how to dismantle it before it becomes cancerous.
Right.
And we thank God that he could not get in the building.
Yeah.
He had to shoot from outside. If he was in, the numbers would be way high.
Absolutely.
Devastation, way high.
Yeah, based on the amount of rounds. And, just seeing some of the imagery, I don't know if you guys saw the mother that running through, just running straight. She just broke through, I guess, whatever barricades. And there's like video and pictures of this mother just running. She takes her shoes off, just trying to get to her child. And I just, my heart just went out to her, because I feel like I would have been the same way. Like, I don't care what you're telling me. Right now, I need to get to my child. And so, yeah, our hearts and our prayers go out to all those families impacted, to Minneapolis, and all of those who are right now trying to grapple with this happening in their area. So
nobody thinks much about the parents of the actor, the person. But I remember there was a case a few years ago where a man went into an Amish school and killed, I believe, 7 little girls there.
I remember that.
The Amish elders went to the parents of the man who did the shooting and embraced them and said, we know that you're hurting too. And and it was one of the greatest acts of grace that could ever be imagined. So let's remember to be gracious as we look at these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, there's so much more we can talk about. Definitely want to give a shout out to Palm Forge Academy and their alumni weekend. Of course, that happens every Labor Day weekend, so a lot of festivities.
Great service yesterday. Great service.
All weekend, yeah. All weekend. Yeah.
Tell us about the sermon, Tosh.
It was powerful and timely.
It was. Great service.
Yeah. I have to go back and listen to it.
But yeah, shout out to Palm Forge Academy and all of the alum who celebrated this past weekend. All right, so as we mentioned, it is Labor Day weekend, and a lot of times when we think about Labor Day, it's a day off. People think, oh, a day off of labor, right? But we know that the holiday has much more meaning to it, and so we wanted to dedicate today's podcast to taking a little bit of a deeper dive into labor and all of the things associated with regarding justice and even unions as we know it. So let's go ahead with our opening and open up this dialogue, Tally, for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And welcome back to all of our friends who join us here on the Upset Podcast. And as you all know, Labor Day is dedicated to women who, after 9 months, have endured the rigors of. Okay. Not that. Oh, Labor Day is so that people who have been waiting to buy appliances or furniture can.
Exactly.
Not that either, huh? No. You know what? Most people, when they think of Labor Day, they say it and they think of cookouts and furniture and maybe a few other extraneous things. But the fact of the matter is, Labor Day is more than simply having a day off, having a cookout, doing things to enjoy family and friends, although that's important. Labor Day is something that is tied very closely to the warp and woof of the American zeitgeist, and also connected to the life of the church that we know and love. I'll talk more about that in just a few moments. But first, we celebrate this Labor Day weekend, and we do it by starting off by sharing a few fast facts to help us to better understand why we have something that's commonly called Labor Day. Most people don't realize that this nation didn't start off with a Labor Day, but the concept of Labor Day was born right around the same time that the Seventh-day Adventist Church was born, in the latter 1800s. That's when Labor Day starts. And so there might be some things that are shared in common because Labor Day comes out of the same zeitgeist that the church comes from. Now, if I were to ask you, what's a working day? How many hours is a working day, Marlena? Give us a quick answer on that one.
40.
40 hours a week, which is 8 hours
Yes.
a day.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. A correct answer there. That's why she's Dr. Marlena and I'm just her nurse. But before Labor Day, working days were probably 12 hours long for most people. And people worked every day. If they were lucky, they got Sunday off because that was considered to be the Lord's Day. But people worked hard and under brutal conditions. And because of that, individuals got together and said, we need to advocate for the working class of people. And labor unions were born in this country to come together to try to support the working class and to advocate for better working conditions. And because the people who owned the businesses and who were the captains of industry, this was during the Gilded Age when you had the robber barons and the millionaires, and the chasm between the haves and the have-nots was huge. They did not want to give more money to the laboring class. There was a sense that said certain people were born by their destiny, destined to work. That's how slavery became so popular during those days. And so they didn't want to give up. And there were clashes between the working class and the ownership class, and labor unions came to try to create a greater sense of justice. Those unions began to say we have to not only advocate, but demonstrate our passion for creating a better environment for the worker. And in 1882, on September the 5th, 10,000 workers walked off their jobs without pay and marched through the streets of New York, that great city that has given us Mr. Keenan Tyler. They walked off their job and they said, we will not work under these conditions. And that was the first Labor Day celebration, but it was not an official holiday, not until politicians did what politicians do best, found out which way the people were going, ran in front of them and said, I led you here. And Congress enacted a bill saying that the first Monday of every year in September will be Labor Day. This was June. And Grover Cleveland, who was president at the time, signed it into law, and Labor Day became an official holiday. It should be noted, and we need to take the time to recognize on this Labor Day weekend that Labor Day and the labor unions and the labor movement changed the quality of life for the overwhelming majority of people in America and around the world, actually. But it's because of these workers and these unions and this movement that we have the 8-hour work week. Before that, that 40 hours that Dr. Marlena talked about, that was just a pipe dream. They gave us paid vacations. You didn't have what? No, you worked all the way through. Dr. Keenan could not have taken the vacation he took unless it were for labor unions and the labor movement. Legal benefits where you get the opportunity for health insurance and other things all came as a result of the labor unions and the labor movement. Pension and retirement. You literally worked until you dropped dead in the field. But because of the labor unions and the labor movement, we were able to build retirements and pensions into the system so that at a certain age, thank the Lord, Liza, you could retire and not have to work anymore. So we thank the labor unions and the labor movement for that. And if any group should be appreciative of this, it is the African American community, because labor unions and the labor movement did more to bring African Americans up to a place of respectability and equitability in our society than any other movement during the time, besides the civil rights movement, which came a little bit later. Now, if that is the case about labor unions and the labor movement, we have to ask ourselves a question, and that is, well, let me do this. Let me let you hear from people who will tell you why it is so important for the African American community to respect and appreciate labor unions.
When it comes to Black History Month, it's important to note that the African American community has close ties to the U.S. labor movement. In 1850, an abolitionist preacher formed the first union for Black workers in the United States. Reverend Samuel Ward organized the American League of Colored Laborers in New York City. The union represented former slaves who came to the area to work as skilled craftsmen. Reverend Ward's activism paved the way for future Black labor leadership like A. Philip Randolph, who organized thousands of African American workers by forming the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters in 1925. The IAM has also broken barriers in Black history. In the late 1940s, during the height of Jim Crow, the union banned segregation, a move that paved the way for Black prosperity, diversity, and working class inclusion. Since then, minority representation in the IAM has blossomed on the shop floor, and Black labor leadership has exploded in the ranks. Equality, inclusion, and labor activism, a marriage that's elevated the quality of life for millions of Black working families. Another important piece in history as this monumental month comes to a close.
Wow. So when you think about it, that sounds so important. So, and we want to thank the Petersburg Seventh-day Adventist Church for their praise team for that music in the background. When you think about it, with all of the good things that labor unions have done and that the labor movement did, why then is the SDA Church so opposed to the labor movement and labor unions? Many Adventists don't even realize that the church is opposed to labor unions and labor movement. Those of you who grew up in the Adventist Church, do you remember that is a part of our tradition?
I don't even remember us talking about it, Tad.
Right. And that's why we take a look at it on this Labor Day, because the Adventist Church has been traditionally opposed. This is from a case in Manitoba, Canada, back in this I said 1896. It should be 1986. I got the 9 and the 8 confused. In 1986, this was a case about a woman who was a Seventh-day Adventist who went to court so that she would not be a part of the labor union. This is documentation from the Adventist Church concerning it. Whereas the Christian dare not violate his conscience by giving support to activities or policies incompatible with the principles and counsel set forth in God's word, and whereas an increasing number of Seventh-day Adventists are finding it necessary to explain the position of the church in relation to joining or financially supporting labor unions and similar organizations We recommend, and now the director of communication from our conference will read what the Adventist Church recommended.
That the Seventh-day Adventist Church hereby reaffirm its historical position that its members should not join or financially support labor unions and similar organizations.
Now, I want you to take note of the fact. It's not saying that we've been thinking about this and we've decided that now we don't want to do it. Notice it says its historical position, long-term, long-time position. The church has stood against labor unions, and I guess you would have to say Labor Day. What do you mean historical position? Like Dr. Marlena said, we never really even talked about it. Oh, some people did. Let me introduce to you someone who did talk about labor unions. Who is that, Dr. Keenan?
You're muted, Keenan.
Yeah, that is the church.
No, I said I'm not exactly. Oh, okay, yeah, Ellen White, yes.
Yeah, the church's prophetess, as Dr. Keenan reminds me quite
Who else?
often. Well, yeah. Anyway, when you think about it, the church has a position on labor unions.
What's
tell you
the
what,
statement? But Mr. Cal, I know you are in your presentation. What was her statement?
Well, Marlene, I'm glad you asked. Why don't you read what her statement was? There it is. It just appeared.
I have to just put on my glasses.
Put on your spectacles and take a look at her
Those who claim to be the children of God are in no case to bind up with the labor unions that are formed or that shall be formed. This the Lord forbids. Cannot those who study the prophecy see and understand what is before us? Letter 201, 1902.
The Lord forbids it. Wow, that's some strong language right there. And since it's talking about prophecies and all, let's turn to a person who just wrote a dissertation about the prophecies. Dr. Keenan, read this next statement by the prophetess of the church.
No, I don't want to. No, these unions are one of the signs of the last days. They may be church members, but while they belong to these unions, they cannot possibly keep the commandments of God.
You got to admit, that's pretty strong language right there. God forbids it. While they're in these unions, they cannot possibly keep the commandments of God. This is the inspired voice for the church. So at least you can understand where it comes from. You've got a group of you've got a church, a denomination that came up at the same time as the unions saying you do not join it. I remember I joined the church in 1972. And there were individuals who were threatened with disfellowship for being in unions. And people look at that and says, wait a minute, Ellen White wrote that? Well, yeah, she did write it. But this is what we were talking about last week and what I want to remind us of this week. You got to take things in context and understand some things.
And the culture and the times.
The culture and the times. Say that, Dr. Marlene. And when you think about when Ellen White wrote this, it was during the time, for example, like the Chicago Memorial Day Massacre. I wrote down May 30, 1937. I think it was a little earlier than that. But it was a labor protest in Chicago when steel workers went on strike to picket because of the working conditions there. And because they were so upset and so angry, when the police came to disperse them, they resisted it. A melee broke out, and before you knew it, the police were using tear gas, and then police were using more than tear gas, and it ended with 10 people being killed by police gunfire in Chicago because of picketing and striking that was led by the labor movement. During that same time, in 1876, the Molly Maguires were formed here in the state of Pennsylvania, not far from Pine Forge. Molly Maguires were a group of Irish immigrants who worked in the coal mines, who were so tired of the despicable working conditions. They banded together. They were secretive. And the reason they were secretive is because if the bosses knew who they were, they would be judged and they would be fired. And some of them would even be worse. Molly Maguires, in their attempt to try to advocate for their class of workers, began to resort to violence, along with many other laboring groups. There's a television show very popular now called The Gilded Age. that shows how the working class were being oppressed by the ownership class, and it led to violence, and it led to secret organizations being formed. And so when Ellen White wrote, she wrote in the midst of this violence, the bloodletting, the Molly Maguire, some of them were arrested, 20 of them were hanged. I mean, violence was a part of the labor movement because violence was a part of the ownership. As one religious leader said, the greatest violence ever perpetrated on a society is the violence of poverty. And so Ellen White said, we can't be a part of this. Now that's what she said. And I understand why she said it. Violent episodes like this led a whole lot of religious people, and religious people like stability, and they like things to be orderly, all things decent and in order. And because of this, religious people tend to resist anything that opposes the status quo. They tend to be conservative. And the very definition of conserving means to hold on to something or to preserve something or to protect something that you know and already accept. And so religious people tend to be conservative. And during this time, when workers were saying, we're going to turn the system over, religious organizations were saying, no, we've got to maintain order. And Ellen White, members of this church, joined in with conservatives and said, no, gotta maintain order. Can't have this violence. Same thing's happening nowadays. You got a lot of people saying, we don't need this wokeism. It's too violent. And that's what was happening in those days. And so you get there. However, even though, however, the communications director says,
you're printed in large caps, sir.
There you go. There is more than simply keeping peace. Because like they say on the streets, no justice, Keenan, no peace. And when you look at what the scriptures have to say about justice and fairness and equity when it comes to workers and labor, James, the 5th chapter, the 4th verse, behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts, says the Lord himself through the writing and the pen of the Apostle James. Read the next one, if you'd be so kind, Dr. Keenan, from Malachi chapter 3, verse 5.
Sure, no problem. So I will come to put you on trial. I'll be quick to testify against those who defraud laborers of their wages, but do not fear me, says the Lord Almighty.
And of course, Sister Tosh, if you would read this next passage that comes to us from Deuteronomy 24.
Gladly. Do not take advantage of a hired worker who is poor and needy. Pay them their wages each day before sunset, because they are poor. Otherwise, they may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin.
So the Bible presses the case of the laborer and demands fairness and equity. But the church says we need order. We need decency. You can't be going around burning up things. And we find ourselves every once in a while caught in the tension of what is just and right and what is orderly. That happens. So we've got to ask ourselves some questions. How should we go about advocating for those who labor, while we also consider the need to maintain order and to have peace? We need to figure out, is the church being too conservative in their social and political leanings when it comes to the need to radically change our systems of governance? And even though in America, which has identified itself as being God's community and country, we say that capitalism is godly, every man for himself and everybody works hard and you get what you can. But in the scriptures, the New Testament church is clearly and absolutely socialist in its behavior. Acts chapter 2 and verse 44 says that everyone who believed held all things in common, which gets us close to not only socialism, but communism. So how do we deal with that when we live in a capitalistic society that protects capital at all costs, That's what Donald Trump said when there were uprisings in the street. He says, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Because it's more important to protect windows and furniture than to protect human life. And last but not least, in light of all of these things, should we celebrate Labor Day? Because violence was used to help build it, but it was also how we were able to create a life that led to fairness and equity for all people. Should we celebrate it? And if we should celebrate it, how? Now, the bad news, ladies and gentlemen, is I don't know the answer to these things. I just come with questions and with observations, but I'm in the presence of individuals who have pursued their educational pursuits to the limits of their terminal studies, coming up with doctorates so that they might be able to pronounce to you what is fair, right, and just. So I say to them, what say you all? And what say you one as we consider Labor Day on this weekend?
That was good, Tommy. That was good.
Yeah, it was.
That was a great overview.
Yeah, but I mean, but like most of us, we don't know. The church has a position against labor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as with a lot of things that we have a stance on, I think we need to reconsider some things. Obviously, I feel like that's the theme of our discussions these days. But honestly, I don't think I definitely understand why during that time, for instance, Ellen White was speaking against participating in these violent type of activities, which is primarily what the unions were doing. That was what they were about. I currently, in this current context, there are some things that unions may do that may not coincide with what we believe, but for the most part, I see it as a civil way of addressing concerns and advocating for individuals. And I definitely think that's something that, anytime we talk about justice, as we were talking about earlier, is something that we should be fighting for. And it impacts our members. And, if our members aren't able to work, they aren't able to give. And then if they're not able to give, then mission isn't able to go forth as far and wide as we want it to. So it does have an effect on us. And I think we should.
It should be noted, though, that the unions were not out to be violent.
Right.
They were out to advocate for justice and fairness for themselves. However, when those who are in control, when those who manage the status quo resist that, and police come and they use their sticks to push you along and so forth, you can only take so much. And so you push back and it becomes violent because people are resisting your attempts to do what you need to do. The Black Power movement, and I stand to be corrected on this, Keenan, the Black Power movement didn't start off yelling Black Power, trying to be violent.
Right.
But Stokely Carmichael and the boys, after getting beaten in the head by enough billy clubs and chewed up by enough dogs, they said, look, what we need is not marching, we need power. And so violence becomes the tool of last resort for people who feel that their cry for justice has gone unheard. So how do we support that? I mean, labor is still that way. I mean, in the city of Philadelphia, we had to deal with trash building up in the streets because labor would not allow people to pick up our trash. How do we support it? Do we support it?
Well, I mean, it sounds like from your presentation, just historically and even currently, the SDA Church opposed labor unions, because of, you may lose your the loss of individual liberty or conscience. You might be forced to do something that's, that you just don't want to partake in, So I understand that historical, maybe even current perspective. But at the same time, Adventists strongly support fair treatment of workers and believe in justice, equity, and safe conditions. But it sounds like the Adventist Church just prefers to go about pursuing these goals outside of union structures.
So yeah, and that's my thing. Like if you don't want, or if you're speaking against unions, then what is the alternative to? And I feel like we stop at, like, we don't support that, but we don't go to the extent to say, but this is what we're going to do to show that we want fairness, we want justice. So if not the unions, then what? I think is sometimes where we stop short. Even sometimes with social justice. This kind of is related to that, but even with, when it comes to racism and things like, oh, we don't support Black Lives Matter because of this. But there's never but we do this, but we do this. Like, it's almost like, okay, so how do we show our support in the church if we're going to speak against something?
Now, I heard someone say that the church supports fairness for workers and so forth. Correct? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, I said, yeah. I think, and when I say that, I mean, I think because the scriptures that you put up there, if we're believing the Bible, we should be in support of fair treatment of all workers.
In all aspects of life.
A landmark case for fairness in the workplace was launched back in the 70s over in California, where a woman realized that she was not being paid the same wages as her male counterparts. And when asked about it, she was told that her male counterparts were given what was called head of household pay. And she took the employers to court. She said, I am the head of my house. My husband's not working now, so I'm the head of household. She took her employers to court, and they resisted. They said, no, this is not fair. That employer, the woman's name was Mary Kay Silver at the time. Her name now is Mary Kay McLeod. The employer was Pacific Press of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Do we still want to say that the church is about fair pay for its workers?
Did she win?
She won. It became a landmark case. Books were written about it. As a matter of fact, this young lady, years ago, many of you might remember, there was a little booklet called Now about the last days. And in all the little church schools, everywhere, people were putting on plays about this book called Now. It was written by this young lady, Mary Kay. And she went on to become one of the editors at Pacific Press, which at the time was, I think it was bigger than Review and Herald. It was a flagship institution of the church. But that was not the only place. The grandmother of our own Corey Johnson, who was one of a set of twins, worked here in the Allegheny East Conference in the educational system. And it was discovered that they were making less as teachers in the educational system of the Allegheny East Conference than others. And people launched into a fight. And one of the people who championed their cause went on to become the mayor of the city of Philadelphia, John F. Street, saying that they should be getting head of household because these two women were the head of their household, but because they were women, they could not get it. Shall we still say that the church is for fairness?
I do think because that head of household thing came from where?
Sexism.
No, I'm saying because any policy that the church adopts or something is usually from something else.
Sexism.
No, what I'm saying, like government, like there are a lot of things that like I feel may be unfair, but the law says this or the government says that, and we just take those things as this is what the law says, and we don't evaluate how we can adjust some of those things so I'm wondering if that was something they were just adopting and then never really looked into. And because in essence, it was the church bringing it to the attention, right? That these things were happening. That to me, that's a perfect example of the church, someone challenging, even we have to challenge ourselves to say, let's do better. So with John Street advocating for those teachers, he was doing the right thing. No, structurally,
he got kicked out.
But from the church, or you're talking about when he lost election, which is?
Oh, he got kicked out. He was a teacher for the Allegheny East Conference at one point.
Okay.
And they said thou troublest Israel. And they gave him the Denver boot.
But now in 2025, because I don't hear of that much, I'm
Oh, no, it's changed.
wondering if, things have changed. That's no longer the focus, because violence, as it was not intended then, is not really the focus of our labor unions of today. But we know that people are still being unequal in pay, especially women to men,
Oh, absolutely.
Race to race. And so you kind of need it for your safety and security.
Well, I'll give you a good example. In our church, it's no longer gender as far as salary, but your ability to earn is based upon your status. And one status in our church that still exists is the status of ordination.
Yeah.
That if you are not ordained, then there's certain offices you cannot hold, and certain levels you cannot achieve, which captivates or capitates rather your salary. In many conferences, Tasha, who is a communications director, is a male, not a minister, but a male. But I've known several communications directors, males, who were ordained, just like they did certain treasurers. My college roommate was a treasurer, and they ordained him so that he could have certain rights, prerogatives, and benefits solely because of that. We had a former communication director in this conference. They ordained him. He had never pastored a church, but solely so that he could have certain benefits, rights, and prerogatives. But they will withhold it now from women, and that allows them to manage compensation and certain authorities. I didn't mean to bring you into this that way, Taj, and I didn't even mean to launch into that, but I felt moved.
Right. So like I said earlier, if the Adventist Church today strongly supports fair treatment of workers, and if we believe in justice and equity and safe conditions, but it seems like we just have to look how to fight against these systems of injustice outside of unions. That's what I'm hearing, from your presentation. And I know the question is how can that be done? But in what you just said, Sally, right now, currently, do we really? Because even though I said it, do we really agree in the fair treatment of workers today?
That's the thing. We don't all agree on what fair is. I think that's part of the issue.
In this country, well, actually around the world, I'd imagine, people tend to side with power, and power is typically with the owners. I tell you what, if you want to see whether or not the church is for fair treatment of workers, as ministers, get together and try to form a ministerial union.
I'm sure some policies will come out shortly after that thing.
See what happens. Or backlash. Ask the teachers who work, say, form a teachers union in the Adventist church. And then, because what you have to do, whenever you're trying to do anything in life, you have to organize. And if you organize, you have to create structure. And if you create structure, you have to institutionalize it so that the structure can be maintained beyond the point of drive. So go into the office, Keenan or Marlena, and say, we were thinking of that.
Sally, you got the devil in you, buddy.
What did I say? Now, we just talked about how important unions were, especially for Black people. And all I'm saying is, if you want,
I agree with you. It's going to cause backlash, I believe.
But why? Because the church wants to treat its workers fairly.
I feel like that should be part of human resources, a committee that's formed of individuals representing each group, whether it's pastors, teachers, office workers, and they're allowed to meet, share concerns, and bring it to HR and have HR discuss with administrators or something. I do believe that we need to create more space for voices in particular situations. Like, so teachers what teachers feel is different from what pastors feel. Their needs are different from, the office staff is different from pastors, but they also have their level of concerns. But all of these individuals should be considered. So I feel like when it's done without some type of formal inclusion of administrators or leaders, it's seen as a group forming to, oppose or resist. Whereas if it's organized in a way where it's showing intentionality about real change, then we could possibly get somewhere.
Yeah. Wait, Tyler, before you say something, I just want to say this piggybacking off what Natasha said. Hypothetically speaking, Tally, if the pastors were to unionize, right, what would be our talking points? I would like to hear what are your thoughts there, Tally. What are we fighting for? What is it? What's the 3 points
increased pay
that this union is fighting for, Tally?
Money is never my main issue. So the first thing would be how to better allow for self-determination. I mean, for example, I know a pastor who got to a church, new president came in, didn't like him, moved him out. He didn't have any say in the matter. I mean, and nobody could help him. And that could happen to any of you. It could happen. Now, we have decent people in our conference, but it could happen to any of you. So how does one allow for a better sense of negotiation for where one will end up? That's first. Secondly, what most people don't realize is that in the Adventist Church, even though you are an employee of the conference, you are not considered to be an employee when it comes to your Social Security taxes. Therefore, your employing organization does not pay that other 7.5% of your Social Security tax. You have to pay it. And that's only because of a stipulation as to how you are identified for tax purposes. A union might help you address that. And then last but not least, I'll give you a good example. I retired at the end of 2021. I am still not receiving my retirement pension. Still. Because of paperwork and all sorts of stuff. Now I'm simply saying a union would help you to better address these issues. When we celebrate Labor Day, and that's what this weekend is about, what we are celebrating is the ability for those who have the least amount of power to be represented against those who have the most amount of power. That's what Labor Day is all about that celebration. It was Frederick Douglass who said that power never concedes anything without a demand. It never has, and it never will. It was Jesus who gave the model that in order to be the leader, in order to be first, you must willingly surrender power. Pick up your cross. The cross is an emblem of a willingness to surrender power. The Apostle Paul says that Jesus, even though he was equal with God, and it wouldn't have been robbery for him to assume that, he surrendered his godliness, took on the form of a servant. That is the model of Christianity. How do I yield power for the sake of empowering others? It is the model of capitalism to say, how can I amass power for the sake of controlling others? And it's a spiritual thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And I, as I was listening and to what you just said, and even our discussion about
that's some dangerous thinking too.
I feel like it's always a work in progress, meaning there's some things that we have today, let's just say as church employees, that several generations before us did not have. Even when we look at our retirement plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't want to trigger you, Tally, but there were a group of individuals from our regional conferences who said, yeah, we need to do something else. And
Yeah,
they
we gotta do
came
that.
together and formed something that now we're recognizing is even more beneficial than what was being offered by, the North American division. And so it shows me that we can make change. We can make change when people come together. Uh, and there are people who are gradually advocating for things within our organization. I mean, anytime we get any sort of pay bump, it's because somebody went to the mic at a meeting and said, I think due to the cost of living or the things that are happening in the world, that we know your budgets are tight. We know, because often Mr. Martin comes back and he shares some of the discussion in terms of, some people say this is going to be tough for us, but because they want to make sure they're still supporting their workers, they bite the bullet and make sure that those increases happen. So it shows me that some things are being done. There are other things that still
Mhm.
to continue to be championed, maybe a little bit more. But a lot of times, those who feel this way don't have a forum, as you were saying, Tyler, to express it, so it never gets to the places that it needs to get for real change to happen. So I don't know. I was just reflecting.
I mean, it is. I mean, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has no unions anywhere, and I get that. In a perfect world, you wouldn't need a union because people would sit down and try to figure out how to do what's fair.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, the world is not perfect, and nowhere is that imperfection more dangerous and sinister than when a person feels that your unfair treatment is divinely ordained.
Hmm.
That I have a right to treat you this way
Because you're not a human being.
because you're not a human being, or you're not as equal as I am.
Right.
Here's a good example, and this look, I'm not trying to cause trouble. I mean, you guys know that's not my nature.
Of course.
I mean, is it fair for a church like a Brinklow to have $2.5 million in tithe and all of it leave the church? Is that equitable? Is it fair? Now, before you answer, I'll tell you this. Over in California, Loma Linda said, no, that ain't fair, and we ain't sending all of it no more. The conference said, but my brethren, it is the policy. The policy says you send it all. And the brethren at Loma Linda said, tell you what, you can have a percentage of what we collect, or you can have a percentage of all we collect, or you can have all of none of it. And they worked it out with the brethren and decided that, hey, maybe we ought to do something there. Because that's what happens. Labor Day says that you have to negotiate fairness. You have to. And in celebrating it, we have to ask ourselves, how's that done?
So just to pivot a little bit, when I was growing up and I first heard about unions, my first introduction to it as a child was that people were, on strike or picketing. And that was my, first introduction to it. So I was thinking, I keep thinking about how everything translates to our work environment. I don't know. Has there ever been a pastor strike or a teacher strike within the church? And I'm not talking about Allegheny East. I'm just talking about period. Have you ever heard of that or seen
In
that?
all Christendom or Adventism?
Let's just bring it down to Adventism.
You mean outside of like fighting for regional conferences?
Right, like a school where the teachers say, unless this happens, we're not showing up. Mm-hmm. Or pastor saying, unless this happened, we're not going to church. That's never happened.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is fighting for regional conferences. That's what immediately comes to my mind. But outside of that, nothing.
I mean, and I think that is one of the things that sets us apart. In that most of the people who are in church work care so much about what they're doing, like the individuals that they like. For you all as pastors, your heart is for people, and so regardless of what may be happening with wage or what treatment or something, you would leave to allow someone else to come, as opposed to just not showing up and leaving the church without someone. And I feel like the same would
Wait,
happen.
what?
I'm saying you would rather, instead of just not show up, like ghost the church, you would rather resign or walk away knowing that another pastor would come and take your place, as opposed to I guess I'm saying I feel like a lot of times in ministry, because it is a ministry, you know, we don't think as much about that strike side or that protest side that involves not doing our job, if you know.
Right. I mean, but some pastors will abandon their churches. I mean, that
is true.
Really? I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by that, Kenyon. I mean,
but I'm saying, when I say abandon, I mean some pastors have, they just said next Sabbath or my last Sabbath, they just leave, no plan, nothing in place, just out, just gone. You know, that has happened. And then the church got to figure it out, Congress got to figure it out. They didn't really give no notice, just left.
I mean, but that's not an act of protest. That's
no. I know.
Yeah.
No. That's I know that. That's but Latasha was saying how pastors just care so much. So I hope everybody under that.
He like something. Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was a younger pastor, we were thinking about forming a union.
Oh, really?
And the next thing I know, I ended up with a career in radio. But but we were thinking about forming a union because there were things happening we just didn't appreciate. But there are different ways that you lodge your protest. You know, you never want to leave the church in the lurch. You never want to leave your people in the lurch to tear down that which you have tried to build up. So there are other ways that you would have to make your opprobrium known. But you know, the truth of the matter is you never want conflict to become destructive.
Right.
It only becomes that way when you perceive that you are not being heard. I mean, in a marriage, when you think you're not being heard, violence comes next. And I don't mean fists, but violence comes next. Like, you know, for example, you know, you're not sleeping in this bed with me. That's a violent act. It's not fisticuffs, but it is violence. Or I'm just not talking to you anymore, because violence is, and this is what Dr. James Gilligan, the foremost authority of violence in this country, he says that when a person perceives that they're being negated to the point of erasure, violence becomes the natural recourse. And that's what happens. A lot of times that violence is passive aggressive. Keenan, you've seen that in your field. It's passive aggressive. A lot of times that violence becomes internalized, where people will start drinking or drugging, and it's violence perpetrated upon themselves. But it is because I am not being heard. I am not being received as I feel is fair and just. And I see it happening in ministry quite often, but it isn't organized and it isn't protest. It's just destructive, unfortunately. You know, not coming to workers' meeting or not turning in reports. That, you know.
Interesting. All right, so I guess we are all challenged, huh?
Happy Labor Day.
We're all excited about work. I don't know. I just feel like, you know, as I think about my context, and of course, all of our viewers and listeners are, you know, thinking about their context. We know that, you know, our audience may not be employed by the church, so they have different things. So it's reflecting on when you see something happening in your space that does not seem right. Do you say something, or do you go to advocate? Are you a part? I'm just curious if our listeners can put it in the chat. Are you a part of a union? What do you see are some of the benefits of that? If you're not, why did you opt not to be? So I'm just curious about our listeners, since we're not able to interact with you live, how you're feeling about this, where you are. But I definitely think, as I'm thinking about this, we need to do better with creating opportunities to hear what people feel may not be equitable. Because a lot of times we talk amongst each other, or we talk with other individuals, but never really get to a place where it can be shared. And I think as organizations, any organization, whether it's ours or anyone else, needs to make sure that they're constantly communicating with their workers to find out if there's any way they can improve what is currently going on.
Wait, so Latasha, so are you saying that right now that we don't have if the workers are feel that they're being done an injustice, that they don't have an avenue to speak, to voice their issues?
I mean, of course, everybody can send an email. But I mean something a little bit.
But that's not an avenue.
Exactly. I'm thinking something a little bit more formalized. You know, open discussions or surveys that then discuss. Something that's structured, that's not dependent on one individual who's fed up. Sending a letter to HR or something.
Yeah. The advocate for a pastor is supposed to be the ministerial secretary.
Right.
Supposed to be. Failing that.
Why do you stress that, dear Tyler?
What's that?
Why you say supposedly? Why do you stress that?
Well, that's how the system is set up. But it doesn't work that well because typically the ministerial secretary serves at the pleasure of the president. So if you serve at the pleasure of the person and I'm having a difficulty with that person, then you're not advocating for me. You're advocating for them. And that's why I say supposed to be. It is, I have never had a problem lodging my complaint. I'm going to be heard.
Mm-hmm. We know that.
That's going to happen. I'm going to be heard. And it hasn't always worked out well for me. I've never been harmed. I've never been harmed, but it hasn't worked out well. But at the heart of God is fair treatment. Mm-hmm. It always at the summum bonum, the sine qua non element with God. I talked to Tasha about this earlier, and that is Israel was destroyed because Solomon created slave labor conditions that his son Rehoboam was intent on following up. And because of that, the 10 tribes said, we're out of here. And they separated from that. In the book of Amos, chapter 2, you hear God taking the people to task. He says, I'm tired of the way you're treating poor people and the common workers. It is always at the heart of it. But power tends to resist change. It just does. Mm-hmm. I mean, as a pastor, it does. And so we have to encourage ourselves. We have to accept opportunities to divest ourselves of power. And that's not always easy to do.
Power. Ooh, mercy. And I know we're about to close as it's time to wrap up. But, just thinking about our church, we always like to kind of give some context of how the church can be involved in something like this. And, I talked about workplaces creating a space, but I believe churches can also create a space where individuals can talk about their workplace struggles. Maybe, create a space where members who are dealing with injustice on their workplace can get counsel or something where we can edify our members, because a lot of us spend our members spend most of their time either at work and some of them at church. So if most of their day is consumed with something they may be experiencing, this is another way the church can help support individuals who may be dealing with workplace struggles, process some of those things that they're going through. Just a thought to throw out there.
Mm-hmm. Well.
All right, guys. Happy Labor Day.
Happy Labor Day.
That was great knowledge there, Tally. I mean,
I appreciated that history.
This was an eye-opening to all of us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm grateful that you feel that way, and you guys are in a position to follow up on this. I'm a geezer out in the pasture, so.
You are not. You're not. But no, thank you all for the discussion, and appreciate all of you who are watching or listening. And we'll be back here again, same time next week. So please join us for another discussion. Take care, everyone. Have a great week.
Blessed
Bye from
holiday,
the
blessed
geezer.
week, everyone.